Discover the incredible moment a millionaire dad witnesses a waitress transform his nonverbal son. Jake Sullivan sat in a humble diner, quite a departure from his usual polished boardrooms. The flickering neon signs above and the smell of greasy fries and burgers filled the air, yet it felt strangely uncomfortable. Surrounded by the laughter of patrons, he couldn't help but feel like an outsider, a king surveying his kingdom from the shadows, burdened by his $1 million empire that left him feeling hollow. Outside success did not equate fulfillment, and as he glanced at the empty husk of a man in the reflection of the diner's worn glass, he recognized something was desperately wrong. His young son, Ben, sat at a booth a few feet away, casting curious glances at the waitress, Emily. Beneath the surface of his silence lay a world of gestures and expressions, an internal dialogue that Jake struggled to unlock. Frustration clawed at him, and a chilling wave of helplessness enveloped his thoughts. How could a father, a millionaire even, be so incapable of connecting with his own child? The weight of his corporate victories felt like chains, anchoring him in a reality where love remained just out of reach. Jake clenched his jaw, questioning his every move. He felt the judgmental eyes of other diners piercing through him, weighing his worth not with assets, but with affection, a currency he struggled to understand. With a sigh, he turned his attention back to Ben, whose eyes sparkled as Emily approached, her warm smile lighting up the room. Why couldn't he be like her? Effortless and genuine, she engaged easily, coiling around laughter and twinkling eyes as she interacted with the children nearby. There was an undeniable innocence in her world, a whimsicality he lacked amid the cold pragmatism of market analysis and stock gains. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Jake observed an unexpected change as Emily knelt down to talk to a little girl at the next table. Her gentle manner and joyous laughter seemed to cast a spell, drawing Ben's attention. For the first time in ages, a flicker of life brightened Ben's normally vacant expression. An awakening, perhaps? A sense of panic ripped through Jake. Could it be true? As Emily wandered closer, her gaze resting on Ben with intuitive understanding, Jake's insecurities surged. Could this woman reach him in ways he never could? Yet, the shadows of doubt surfaced as he watched. What if Ben didn't respond? What if Emily's kindness was met with silence? The potential to be laughed at, to be judged not just as a father but as a man of wealth who failed to connect, overwhelmed him. Still, desperation gnawed at him, and before he could rethink, he asked Emily if she could try to engage Ben. And so, she did. She produced whimsical doodles on a cocktail napkin, a tiny boat, a sun, each line shaped with gentle strokes, and no sooner had she begun than Ben reached out, his fingers tentative but eager. Jake's heart raced, then stuttered as he felt the ground shift beneath him. But just as hope sprouted in the corners of his mind, ominous news whirled about. Rumors about corporate investors eyeing the diner for disinvestment filtered through the air. The realization hit him hard, a storm brewing on the horizon, ready to sweep away this unexpected haven. The diner, the very place that sparked a connection between his son and a stranger, could vanish. Torn between the relentless pull of his affluent lifestyle, or status beckoned like an ever-elusive flower, and his son's first real connection, Jake stood on shaky ground, clinging to the burgeoning affection rekindled in a space far removed from his pristine world. Jake felt trapped in the full clench of his fears. Would he dive into the fray to protect this slice of magic? Would he dare challenge the suffocating norms of his life, or would he run back to his boardrooms, suffocated by the very standards that crafted him? The unanswered questions tightened around him, like a noose. Jake's mind raced, a cacophony of thoughts crashing against one another. He couldn't let this diner fade into nothing. It had become more than just an eatery, it was a bridge to his son, the first spark of connection that had eluded them for far too long. Yet, the prospect of confronting his investors, the men who clinked glasses over deals with little regard for human matters, felt unreal. He closed his eyes momentarily, envisioning Emily cheering Ben on as he engaged with her. None of that would be possible if the diner shut down. It struck him that he was ready to fight to preserve this glimmer of hope but had no clue how to straddle the worlds of his privileged life and this humble existence. Jake was drawn to Emily's laughter like a moth to a flame. Her ease around children illuminated a truth he had long ignored: he didn't just need professional success, he craved emotional satisfaction, authentic connection. It seemed to hinge on a simple diner and an even simpler woman whose warmth made the world feel less cold. As she lingered by Ben's side, she began to draw, not just the pictures on napkins, but the bond he yearned to build with his son. He glanced at her while she engaged, captivated by her presence. In that moment, he realized he had to act. It wasn't enough to wish for connections from afar. He needed to roll up his sleeves and get involved. He wrestled with the realization that his own abilities in business persuasion, negotiation, strategy could be recalibrated to fit this personal mission. Stepping forward from his booth, Jake brushed a hand through his hair, heart pounding violently against his chest. "Emily," he called out, voice quaking ever so slightly. She turned, her expression shifting from playful joy to curiosity, encouraging him to elaborate on his intentions. He took a breath, heart racing. "Can I help you with what you're doing with Ben?" The words tumbled out, filled with a blend of humility and uncertainty. The smile that broke across her face hit him like a ray of sunlight bursting through clouds. "Sure. I'd love that." He's really paying attention now. The warmth of her acceptance ignited something in him. As they crouched by Ben, he inhaled the aroma of the diner, a heady mix of fried food and youthful exuberance. He watched Emily as she meticulously returned to the napkin, doodling, detailing a vibrant sun, glimmering waves, and imaginatively describing each stroke as Ben's eyes sparkled with inquiry. Jake realized he was no longer just a father observing but a partner in this magical moment of exploration. He reached for the crayons and joined Emily in her creative endeavor, at first awkwardly but increasingly with confidence, crafting simple shapes alongside her. Awareness struck him, a profound moment of clarity materializing from the ordinary. He was learning not just to communicate with Ben but to connect with him. Each stroke they made together filled him with a sense of empowerment over the growing fear of losing this place where possibilities thrived. Yet all of this newfound resolve skirmished with the looming specter of corporate pressure, the threat of disinvestment casting dark shadows across his aspirations. Would his engagement with Ben thrive, or would the heavy hand of wealth crush it before it had a chance to flourish? The diner's future hung precariously, forcing him into a gut-wrenching realization. It wasn't merely about fighting for a place but about deciding whether to dismantle the walls of his corporate identity to protect this invaluable bond. As Jake delved deeper into this awareness, something inside him simmered, a determination igniting amidst the chaos. Ignoring the obstacles ahead, he turned to Ben, who was now reaching out, eager to participate in this experiment of imagination and discovery. Just then, a call from the diner's kitchen shattered the moment. News about an important meeting with the investors bent on taking control flooded his mind. The time had come to face the reality of his two worlds colliding, and in that intersection lay the choice that could redefine his existence, both as a millionaire and, more importantly, as a father. What would Jake decide? Would he sacrifice the alliances built on logic and secrets for an authentic relationship with his son? Would he find the courage to challenge the systemic expectations of his successful life? He was teetering on the edge, and the answer hung in the air, tantalizing and daunting. The choice loomed before him, emboldened by love and threatened by desperation. The time had come to confront not only the boardroom battles but the very definition of his legacy. Jake took a deep breath, weighing the gravity of the moment as he looked at Ben, who was still enraptured with Emily's animated storytelling. The carefree laughter echoed around him, contrasting sharply with the tension clawing at his insides. He had faced countless boardroom negotiations, each one a chess match calculated in strategy and positioning. But this didn't require the precision of commerce, it demanded something deeper, his very self. As the laughter faded, he focused back on Emily, who was leaning closer to Ben, her eyes sparkling with encouragement. The intensity of the small scene ignited a visceral understanding. He was watching not just a waitress entertain his son, but a woman building a world of imagination that Jake desperately wanted to be a part of. He needed to break free from the self-imposed barriers that dictated his approach. This was about connection, not transaction. "Why don't you take a short break?" Emily suggested, glancing at Jake with a knowing smile.
I can keep Ben company while you gather your thoughts.
This invitation struck him like a challenge. Here was an opportunity to not only support an emotional bond with his son but also embrace the unfamiliar territory of sincere involvement. Instead of retreating to a space of comfort and detachment, he was being offered a ticket to explore a life that felt genuine and raw. Jake looked down at Ben, who seemed ready to dive deeper into the colorful world they had begun building. The boyish eyes held joy, devoid of apprehension, and Jake knew that mirroring that innocence was essential. "No, I'd like to stay," he decided, startling himself with the conviction in his voice.
"I want to be a part of this." Emily beamed at him. "Great.
Let us create a whole story together, then." They gathered around Ben, who immediately grabbed a crayon and started to doodle. Jake mimicked him, the once awkward initiation melding into a rhythm of creativity. They began constructing a wild tale involving fantastical creatures that soared above vast oceans, united through laughter and teamwork. As they drew, a realization washed over Jake: he possessed the same ability to weave dreams into reality that he had always applied in his business life. But this time, it wasn't about profit margins or bottom lines, it was about nurturing the spirit of a child, the raw essence of imagination and playfulness. His heart raced not from fear, but from the thrill of rediscovering a part of himself long dormant. A wave of emotions surrounded him, compounding with thoughts of the impending boardroom meeting wrestling for dominance in his mind. He felt the weight of dual existence pressing upon him. Could he continue in a corporate world driven by metrics, while diving headfirst into this new realm of fatherhood and connection? Or would he choose to make his path radiate through this diner, valuing people over profits? With every stroke of the crayon and every laugh that followed, the chasm between his past and future shrank. He was rejuvenated by this connection, feeling a power within his role that surpasses even his corporate titles. Yet with that illumination came the persistent whispers of his investors, echoes of their ambitions and cold calculation. A serving worker passed by with a plate, breaking Jake's concentration briefly. He could hear snippets of conversations about the upcoming disinvestment plans and the pressures his partners were applying to carve up the diner for a quick return. The thought gnawed at him, but the warmth of Ben's laughter brought him back to the moment. Jake glanced at Emily, and for a fleeting second, their eyes locked, each sensing the stakes involved. His heart pounded, a pooling of uncertainty and possibility surging through him. The choice was no longer a question of strategy but one of identity. As Ben's imaginative strokes painted a bridge between worlds, Jake understood he stood on the precipice of change, a change that could either plunge him back into the depths of corporate greed or liberate him into a world of possibility that felt right and worthy. Suddenly, the door swung open, drawing the trio's gaze to the fray outside. A figure entered, one that could potentially force Jake's hand, challenging the precarious balance he had begun to forge. In an instant, the diner felt smaller, the weight heavier, and the stakes clearer. Jake's resolve solidified. Whatever route he took, he would not allow this connection to wither in the face of intimidation. The moment had come to face his life's defining choice. Would he fight for love and connection or let corporate strategies dictate his path forward? The doorway, and the figure that loomed there, foreshadowed everything that hung in the balance. The figure in the doorway was clad in a dark suit, sharp and imposing like a hawk surveying its territory. Jake recognized him immediately. It was David, one of the pivotal investors in his business. The man exuded a commanding presence, his eyes scanning the diner with a predatory interest before settling on Jake. A chill clawed at Jake's spine as David's mouth curled into a smirk, the kind that suggested he had come with ulterior motives. "Jake, there you are. I was hoping to catch you," David called, his voice booming in the lively atmosphere of the diner. Emily's demeanor shifted slightly, an acute awareness dawning in her eyes as she shifted away from their circle of creativity, sensing the tension in Jake's stance. Ben, blissfully unaware of the shifting dynamics, continued to draw, his laughter punctuating the growing heaviness in the air. "What brings you here?" Jake asked, striving to maintain composure. Yet the inquiry felt trivial against the backdrop of his internal conflict. He was teetering on the edge of transformation while the specter of his corporate life loomed large. "Just came by to discuss a few business opportunities," David replied, his tone dripping with condescension. "I see you've been busy, entertaining." He glanced at Ben, diminishing the moment of connection Jake had fought so hard to embrace. For a brief, tantalizing moment, Jake contemplated retreating behind the facade of his corporate armor. It would be so easy to slip back into the world of meetings and presentations, to nod along as David laid out his vision of rapid expansion and profit margins. But when he looked at Ben, scribbling away in blissful ignorance, the weight of his responsibilities as a father bore down on him like never before.
Is that so?
Jake managed, squaring his shoulders and standing a little taller. Because I've decided to focus more on what truly matters.
Is that really wise?
David countered, taking a step closer, his presence now constricting.
This diner is a prime opportunity. You know that.
It would be a shame to let sentimental notions stand in the way of profit.
Jake felt a knot tightening in his gut.
Here was the dichotomy he had sensed taking shape, his past as an ambitious businessman filled with cutthroat decisions and his present, filled with laughter and imagination spilled across the paper before him. Perhaps some things are worth more than profit, Jake said, injecting a new conviction into his voice. Those words carried the weight of a burgeoning belief, one he had been nurturing since sitting here with Ben and Emily. They felt powerful, more powerful than any executive's decree. David chuckled, a cold, dismissive sound.
Don't let that idealism fool you, Jake. Remember who's in control. Your partners want results, not your musings on childhood. Then perhaps it's time I take control back, Jake retorted, his pulse quickening. He could feel the energy in the room shift, like a dark cloud hovering above his head. Would he allow this corporate shark to dictate his life, or could he carve a new path forward, one not governed solely by profit but by purpose? The tension snapped like a taut rubber band, and Jake could sense it. The moment of truth was nearing. All of his fears coiled within him, threatening to topple the delicate balance he had forged here in this diner. But as he looked at Ben, the joy radiating from his son reminded him of the importance of his new journey. Look, I appreciate your concern, but this is my family. I'm going to protect what matters. David raised an eyebrow, intrigued yet incredulous. You're playing a dangerous game, Jake. You know how things work. Choice is rarely as simple as you may wish it to be. The dual existence of corporate intrigue and personal revelation clashed within him, forcing Jake to confront the reality that his future was now intertwined with the choices he made in this diner. He felt the reign of fear slipping away, replaced by a burgeoning sense of clarity and strength. As David's piercing gaze bore into him, Jake embraced the possibility that lay in front of him, a crossroads where he might liberate himself from expectations. It was in this tension between his commercial obligations and his visceral need for genuine connection that Jake realized he was truly stepping into his own power. Maybe it's time for a shift in direction, Jake whispered, more to himself than anyone else. For both of us. Before he could fully grasp the implications of his words, Ben's laughter cut through the din once more, pulling Jake's focus back to the present, a world filled with imagination rather than spreadsheets. However, David's eyes narrowed, revealing the predator beneath the polished exterior. He was not one to be dismissed lightly. Jake knew he was at the precipice of a choice that would shape his life forever. With each heartbeat echoing in his ears, Jake understood he would either rally to protect this newfound vision of himself or let it wane in the face of external pressure. The stakes were clearer than ever, and the path forward shimmered with uncertainty. It was time to confront not just David but the very nature of ambition itself. Would he cling to the corporate identity that had defined him for so long, or would he allow the voice of fatherhood and sincere connection to guide him into the unknown? The tension crackled anew as uncertainty loomed like a storm cloud. The next decisive moment was just around the corner. Jake felt the air thicken, saturated with unspoken tension as he held David's gaze. Time seemed to stretch, as if every moment hung like a pendulum, swinging between love and ambition, between the weight of expectation and the promise of authenticity. He desperately wanted to retain the clarity he had gained in this diner, but the encroaching shadow of his past was relentless. Jake, you have the opportunity to scale this business, David pressed, his voice low and smooth, like a predator coaxing its prey. Imagine what you could achieve: recognition, wealth, the freedom that comes from financial security. You think this little diner is enough to give you that? All the bravado on display began to flicker as doubt seeped into Jake's mind. He had worked tirelessly, sacrificed time with Ben, and navigated the cutthroat world of business. Was the prospect of placating David and ensuring financial success truly a betrayal of his newfound values? The idea began to gnaw at him with a frenetic urgency. Inwardly, Jake grappled with the precarious balance of family and career.
The innocent laughter of Ben abruptly stopped as he drew a deep breath, clutching his sketch pad tightly, sensing his father's agitation. A pang of guilt shot through Jake at the thought of sacrificing time with his son for an illusory gold rush. "Remember, David," Jake said slowly, forcing the words through clenched teeth, "there's more to life than balance sheets and bottom lines." The protest felt bold but muted by the nagging fear of what David's dismissive response might stir next. David narrowed his eyes, as if weighing Jake's resolve against his own ambitions. "You'll find that ideals do little to protect you from the reality of bills, Jake. Children don't thrive on dreams. They thrive on stability." His words stung, rattling through Jake's confidence like chains reverberating in an empty room, but as Jake inspected David's cold facade, he felt an ember of defiance igniting in his chest. It was the love he felt for Ben, the genuine connections he had forged with Emily and those comforting moments spent within these diner walls that propelled him forward. With each glance cast toward his son, who was passionately engrossed in his art, Jake's heart swelled with conviction. "Maybe stability isn't what I need to provide," Jake articulated, the steadiness in his voice surprising even himself. "Maybe teaching him creativity, resilience, and the importance of following his passion, those are the things that will allow him to thrive." David's smirk faltered, acknowledgement flickering behind his eyes for a fleeting moment before a veil of contempt returned. "You're risking everything with this idealism. What if he doesn't align with your vision? Children can be unpredictable." That statement burrowed under Jake's skin. The fear that had always lurked there, the fear of inadequacy, of failing Ben, confronted him with a new intensity. Perhaps Ben wasn't meant to inherit Jake's corporate legacy at all. Perhaps his son's joy in creating could guide a different legacy, an emotional one, built on the freedom to be themselves rather than the constraints of conventional success. In that realization, Jake felt a momentum shifting within him. The Sunday morning chatter around them faded, the clattering of dishes dulled in his ears, and all that remained was clarity, buoyed by purpose. "If there's one thing I can teach my son," Jake said, determined, "it's the importance of staying true to oneself, regardless of the world's expectations." "The world is unforgiving, Jake," David insisted, a hint of desperation creeping into his voice as he tried to regain control of the conversation. "We both know that. You cannot survive on passion alone." Jake sensed the desperation in David's posture, the predator attempting to pivot back into dominance, searching for weaknesses. "And I can't live in fear of every worst-case scenario you throw my way either. It's time I shed that frame of mind." What had begun as a reflective conversation transformed into a declaration of intent. David's jaw tightened as he chuckled dismissively. "We'll see how long that idealism lasts when reality strikes you." Jake refused to acknowledge David's veiled threat. He felt the weight of his convictions suffusing his spirit, urging him forward. The crossroads had emerged with greater clarity. Ambition could coexist with passion, but he needed to craft a model of both rather than surrendering yourself to one suffocating entity. The diner pulsed with a collective energy as Jake faced David, unyielding. He was taking control, standing tall against the corporate tide he thought he was destined to serve. He could foster stability, but it would be rooted not in financial gain but in the loving foundations he built for himself and Ben. David turned to leave, a sense of fullness engulfed Jake. He was firmly at a juncture, one that chose a path woven from sincerity, art, and dedication over the stale confines of a profit-driven existence. Would he be able to carve out this new avenue while navigating the relentless pressure that came from his investors' expectations? The air buzzed with uncertainty as David's departing presence lingered, leaving the question: would his old world concede, or would it launch a counteroffensive attack? The moment felt pregnant with possibility, charged with the promise of conflict yet to unfold. Jake knew he had ignited a spark. What shadows would that light expose next? Jake lingered for a moment, the weight of David's departure still heavy in the air as he looked toward his son. Ben was busy with his sketches, seemingly oblivious to the intensity of the adult conversation that had just unfolded. But Jake knew more was at stake than casual idle talk. He sensed that Ben was acutely aware of his father's unease. The din around him settled into a muted hum, providing a comforting warmth. He took a deep breath and stepped to Ben's table, lowering himself to his son's eye level. "Hey, buddy," he said, letting a soft smile break through the tension. Ben looked up, a perfect mix of innocence and creativity swirling in his gaze. "What are you drawing?" Jake asked, attempting to bridge the gap that had formed during his discourse with David. Ben hesitated, the pencil hovering above the page before he quickly filled the silence with tenacious scribbles depicting what looked like an overhead view of the diner. "I'm drawing where people get their dreams," he said, his voice filled with sincerity.
A rush of realization washed over Jake. This diner, with its gritty walls and greasy counter, was a sanctuary for dreams, creativity, and growth. He began to internalize a new comprehension of his mission, not just to provide a stable life for Ben but also to foster the environment where dreams could take root. He could feel the seeds of a fresh ambition taking hold, weaving storytelling into their lives as a way of binding their closeness.
"Looks fantastic," Jake encouraged, the creative spirit frolicking in his voice.
"Do you think we could make a mural one day, something that tells the story of our diner?"
Ben's eyes sparkled at the suggestion, brimming with excitement.
"We could. With a big dragon and all the people who come here."
Jake chuckled, his son's imaginative view brightening the dim corners of his own swirling thoughts.
The idea sparked something deeper. Could they build a space where stories and creativity intermingled?
Ideas emitted brighter relevance as visions of community connection seeped into his mind. Feeling emboldened, he decided to engage Ben further in this potentially profound project.
"Let us talk to Emily about it. Maybe she'll help us put our ideas on the wall."
"Really?"
Ben's enthusiasm was infectious, awakening a powerful tenderness within Jake.
"Yes, really. There's more we can do here together, and maybe it will show everyone how important these dreams are." With that, a resolve shifted within Jake, directing his focus outward rather than internalizing the recent adversities. They spent the next hour sketching ideas, laughing about dragons and order-ups colliding in an eccentric mural that would ultimately redefine the diner. Ideas flowed seamlessly, each concept igniting the bond between father and son. But amid this warm exchange, as they immersed themselves in creativity, nagging apprehension lingered in the recesses of Jake's mind. David's warnings echoed through his conscience, merciless reminders of potential failure, of financial insecurity looming at the edges.
Was he opening a door to a world where risks outweighed the unwavering comfort of his past corporate life?
Would this creative venture be the pursuit that defined Jake beyond the boardroom? The dissonance between dreams and reality sat starkly before him, an electric current that pulsed against the optimism he felt in the moments with Ben. The ticking clock in the diner reverberated in the background, amplifying his thoughts. Just as Jake resolved to remain anchored to his newfound ambitions, David returned unannounced, shadowing the diner once more. His presence cut sharply through Jake's tranquility, as if prodding him back to the depths of doubt he'd previously shed. His words glided from polished lips. "Have you thought more about partnering up with me? Because your little art project won't pay the bills, Jake." A chill coursed through Jake's veins.
Could he maintain the balance between who he was evolving into and the imposing figure representing his previous corporate life? The prospect of losing sight of his ambition
unsettled him, and the weight of the moment dampened the excitement that had recently flourished. Jake met David's gaze, determined not to weaken.
"I'm just getting started, David. You have no idea what we're capable of."
Suddenly, the stakes felt perilously high. As Jake braced for the impending confrontation brewing in David's eyes, he internally questioned whether he could hold steadfast amid the swirling storm he had embraced.
Would he be strong enough to withstand the impending conflict, or would the lure of success threaten to upend his commitment to creativity and connection?
Jake's pulse quickened as David's composed demeanor stood in stark contrast to the chaos swirling inside him. The unease he had just begun to tame with Ben's artistic aspirations threatened to surge back like a tidal wave. Here was David, with his sleek, corporate bravado, tempting him with the very security he had been trying to escape.
"Jake, you're an intelligent guy.
You know chasing dreams doesn't pay the bills," David pressed, crossing his arms as if preparing for a battle.
"The diner is not going to sustain you. Why gamble when you have a secure partnership waiting?"
There it was. David's veiled offer strained at the seams of Jake's conscious decisions. It was not simply about the financial safety, it was an ultimatum dressed in the guise of opportunity. Jake had spent years orchestrating his life around stability, yet now, the weight of those years felt like shackles. Could he really break free? Breathless thoughts ricocheted in his mind. He thought about the mural, about the strands of creativity entwining with Ben's innocence, and the fierce determination burgeoning within him. It's not just about paying the bills, David. It's about leaving something meaningful behind, he replied, trying to fill his voice with the strength he was struggling to summon. He caught a glimpse of Ben, engrossed in his sketches, unyielding in his world of make-believe. The sight galvanizing him propelled a wave of defiance. He had been father and provider, corporate cog and caretaker, and now, for the first time, he wanted to be something more, an architect of dreams. David's expression flickered with skepticism.
And what if this throws you further into debt? What happens to Ben if you can't keep a roof over his head? Will this mural feed him? The question stung, ricocheting off the walls of Jake's fortitude. Beneath the anger, a flicker of doubt sparked. Was he being reckless in his quest for fulfillment? Did he even have the talent to realize this vision?
Jake clenched his fist, breathing through the pressure. It was not merely a question of financial feasibility but the essence of what they were creating. Maybe it won't pay the bills right away, but maybe it pays in other ways.
I need to find out if we can build something together. Not just me, but Ben and this diner. We're more than numbers on a balance sheet.
As the silence stretched thin, David's brow furrowed, and something flickered in his eyes, maybe incredulity, or perhaps a grudging respect. It was fleeting, but Jake seized it, clinging to that moment like a lifeline. "Prove it," David finally said, frustration lining his voice.
"Show me this isn't just a fantasy. The clock is ticking."
Jake stood taller, the weight of David's words now transforming into a challenge instead of just an obstacle. "Then I will," he stated, steeling himself against the oncoming storm.
"But it won't be on your terms."
As David turned to leave, Joe from the bar approached, listening intently from behind the counter. The tension in the air thickened. "You got this, man. It's about time someone turned that place into what it can be," Joe encouraged, perhaps sensing the gust of inspiration coursing through Jake. Jake took a moment to absorb the well-meaning sentiment.
Could bringing Ben's mural to life also bring transformation to the diner?
His mind sharpened, aligning thoughts like a line of dominoes ready to fall. He envisioned late nights sprawled over canvases, interactions with locals transforming the diner from a mere eatery to a hub of expression. But it wouldn't come without risk and sacrifice. As he glanced back at Ben, whose magic was wrapped tight in crayons and aspiration, Jake knew there would be no turning back. This was his path unfolding, one fueled by the flickering flames of creativity and ambition, no matter the cost. Yet, as resolve settled over him, he felt a shadow lurking, the fear of what would happen if he faltered. Would he have what it took to lead Ben through this artistic odyssey? A flicker of unease, heavier than before, gnawed at him just as quickly as determination surged. Would Jake stand strong against the pressures of conformity, or would old habits of security tighten their grip once more? Jake pored over the diner's details, each scuff on the tiled floor and dingy wall whispering stories of its past. This place had been a refuge and a trap, a setting of mundane routines that felt suffocating now. Energy coursed through him as he mobilized his thoughts around the mural with newfound urgency.
The idea swelled within him, demanding action, yet every stroke of ambition came tangled with apprehension.
He would need resources: paint, brushes, space, not to mention time. The diner's off hours provided potential, but what if the late nights were exhausting, wearing down his resolve? Could he carve out a sanctuary for creation without jeopardizing his bond with Ben? An image of the mural blossomed in his mind, vibrant colors intersecting and telling a story, a reflection of their journey. What if he could encapsulate the essence of his and Ben's shared dreams, transforming not just the walls, but the environment itself? That shimmer of inspiration ignited his heart, urging him to make the leap. "Hey Jake, are you ready for the lunchtime rush?" Joe's voice broke through his reverie, grounding him momentarily in the here and now. His thoughts wandered again, almost heedlessly, as he considered his first steps. "I'm looking to add a little something to the diner, Joe," he replied, unable to suppress the excitement in his tone.
"We could really make this place sing." Joe raised an eyebrow, skepticism etched across his face. "Like magic? How are you planning to pull that off?" "Imagine a mural, a splash of creativity," Jake blurted out. "Something that tells a story, brings the people together. A whole vibe." He hardly recognized himself, words tumbling freely from the corners of his consciousness, cascading into the room with undeniable enthusiasm.
Could he influence an atmosphere, alter perceptions, challenge the way people felt about the diner? Joe squinted, weighing Jake's passion against the practicalities that usually governed their lives.
You think that LL bring new business? We barely scraped by with what we got.
The truth hung heavy between them. The dwindling foot traffic was like a chokehold on their aspirations.
Still, Jake felt indignant resolve swell up in resistance to Joe's doubts. Not just about business, Joe.
It's about creating a sense of community here, leaving a mark. Ben deserves to grow in a space that embraces creativity, not stifles it. His conviction crushed against the pragmatic haze that too often shrouded his decisions.
Overwhelmed by the chaotic limbs of his ambition, Jake wrestled with himself. Could he risk their scarce resources on this venture? Would the locals embrace a new interpretation of their diner culture?
Mixed with exhilaration was the creeping anxiety of vanity, the fear that he might be overreaching, that playing artist could crumble the very foundation of their lives. Sitting down in a sunlit corner, he pulled a sketchbook towards him and began mapping out ideas. The lines danced to life under his fingertips, visions connecting like stars in a constellation he once thought unreachable. Each figure he drafted encapsulated snippets of their lives, the joy, heartache, hope, and the creativity echoing in Ben's dreams. As he drew, the trembling uncertainty ebbed away, but lurking in the margins of his determination was the specter of doubt, whispering ominously.
Would he falter under the weight of his ambition?
Perhaps transforming the diner was not just an artistic endeavor, it could also serve as a metaphorical mirror reflecting his struggles against conformity. Possibilities began to swirl around him. Imagine Ben's wide-eyed wonder as the mural came alive, a vivid backdrop to their evolving lives. Yet Jake couldn't ignore the fact that every stroke of inspiration either soared him closer to liberation or locked him back in the chains of status quo. The thought of David's skepticism nagged at him.
Could he prevail against the naysayers, leverage nonconformity as power?
As the rush of lunch began, Jake forced himself back to the present, but purpose surged within him.
The moment drew near
when he would need to confront the doubters, starting with David, the bold corporate figurehead who had shaken his foundations.
Jake took a deep breath, grappling with the horizon ahead. Would he stand firm in the face of cynicism and carve a path for himself and Ben, or would he retreat, shackled once again by the assurances of security?
The impending confrontation loomed larger, waiting to test his resolve and define his future. The time had come to face what lay ahead. The diner's bell jingled, an unnerving sound, a reminder of the world outside Jacob's bubble of inspiration.
The lunchtime rush transformed the snug space into a flurry of activity, but chaos only heightened his thoughts. While he took orders, a wildfire of creativity simmered just beneath his skin. He was fiercely aware of the precarious balance he walked, the demand for duty pressed against the sweet siren call of his artistic ambition. He filled cups with coffee, served the daily specials, but his mind drifted toward the mural. Each interaction, every joke exchanged between tables, fueled his resolve. He could embody this energy, fuse it into vibrant strokes across those colossal walls. In every second of laughter or eye roll he witnessed among patrons, there was a narrative waiting to be told, a visual representation of leave-taking and belonging. But looming like a cloud was the argument with Joe. Doubt hung thick in the air he breathed. What if nobody cares? Whispered that insidious voice he struggled with for so long. He shook it off, wiping a counter with distracted vigor. Couldn't the diner be more than just a place where customers consumed? Couldn't it tell the stories of hearts and aspirations? He envisioned every brushstroke swimming into focus, the way colors could unite joyful memories and shared experience. The possibilities overwhelmed him and yet drove him forward. But first, there would be the conversation with David, a meeting he felt was unavoidable yet utterly daunting. Would the corporate titan see the worthy risks, or smother his attempt for change? As the rush slowed, Jake found himself at a quiet table, gathering his thoughts. He pulled out his sketchbook, its pages warm from being tucked under his arm, and began to map out the diner's layout, sketching in the mural's potential space. This wasn't a mere decoration, it would enhance the soul of the diner itself, transforming it into a mini sanctuary. He realized he wasn't just fighting for a mural, he was grappling for his identity, his values, and the legacy he wished to create, not just for himself, but for Ben. The sketching intensified. Characters began emerging, two figures laughing, an echo of Jake and Ben sharing secrets over pancakes, a couple embracing, representing hope and new beginnings.
With each line, he could almost feel the connection pulsating through the sketches, stories crowding around him with exclamations.
Could he tackle each one as part of the mural yet unmade?
Phone in hand, he scrolled to David's name, his thumb hovering over the button.
For a heart-stopping moment, he considered skipping the confrontation. Could he justify this dream to David, or would he simply be met with the familiar air of disdain? Resolute, he dropped the phone onto the table. Instead of retreating into fear, Jake summoned his courage.
This wasn't just about self-affirmation, it was also about challenging the norms that imprisoned him. I have to own this, he murmured to himself, the words thick with urgency. As he left the table, determination molded into his stride, Jake was transfixed by the image of the mural that fought to emerge in his mind, inching closer to existence. But just as he approached the kitchen to find Joe, the bell jingled again, this time revealing a figure unexpectedly significant, eyes searching, radiating both authority and curiosity. Jake froze, the air thickening. He recognized him at once, David. There he stood at the entrance, scanning the diner, and Jake felt a shiver grip his spine. This was the moment, the storm was upon him. Would he articulate his vision, or would he shrink under the weight of corporate expectation, letting opportunity slip through his fingers once more? All collected breaths set the stage for what was next, a confrontation that would either vault him into his future or leave him spiraled in the shadows of synonymity. Would he seize this chance? The answer would define everything. Jake inhaled sharply as his instincts screamed at him to retreat into the safety of his previous life. But he steadied himself, drawing strength from the laughter that still echoed in Ben's creativity, the call to create something meaningful. He recognized the transformative moment that was about to unfold. No longer would he be guided solely by the fear of failure, he would be the architect of his own reality. Jake, we need to talk, David said, his tone leaning heavily on expectation, a precision that felt clinical. There was little compassion in the corporate titan's approach, only the cold pressure of deals and numbers. But Jake was resolute, he would not diminish his burgeoning identity in the presence of fear. You're right, David. We do need to talk, Jake replied, his voice steadier than he felt. A sense of purpose buoyed him, illuminating the darkness that had lingered for too long. What is this place doing for you? David shot back, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. You're jeopardizing everything we've built for, what? A mural? Not just a mural, it's a representation of community, connection, and creativity. It's a life beyond profit margins, Jake articulately countered, feeling the weight of every word land precisely where it needed to. He straightened his shoulders and confronted David, who stood rooted as if he couldn't comprehend the sentiment. A romantic idea, but ideas don't pay bills, Jake, David's voice dripped with condescension, trying to shake Jake's resolve. Maybe they do, Jake fired back. Maybe they inspire people to come together, to invest in something more significant than just tangible aspects. The diner has a spirit, a soul, and I can't let it fade away. The conviction behind his statement electrified the air between them, a palpable tension sparking the courage that had bloomed inside him. For the first time, Jake could see the flicker of uncertainty in David's hard gaze. It hinted at a crack in the towering facade. Jake pressed forward, seizing the opportunity. This diner offers warmth and environment that nurtures dreams. If anything is worth fighting for, this is it. David huffed dismissively, his bravado attempting to cloak a newfound hesitation. Jake felt emboldened by the vibrant spirit of his son that shone through the burdens of expectations. You claim to understand business, yet ask yourself, what kind of legacy are we building? Isn't it time to redefine success? With each word, Jake felt layers of doubt peeling away, replaced with an urgency to reclaim his identity as a father and a man defined not by corporate accolades but by genuine connection. He could sense the shift in the room, the surrounding patrons momentarily paused, sensing the exchange. What if it fails? It could plunge you into chaos, David warned, but the edge in his voice lacked the once steely command it had. Beneath that veneer of control lay a flickering fear of the uncharted. Then I'll learn. Just as Ben will learn. It's not about playing it safe, it's about creating space for dreams and nurturing potential, Jake articulated, grounding himself in undeniable truth. The corporate cronies may have thrived in a world full of efficiency, but he would claim a world built on authenticity. There was a crackle of tension as silence fell between him and David. It was a decisive moment where ambition met vulnerability, where Jake's vision collided with the calculations of his past. David's expression revealed a kaleidoscope of emotions: aggression, skepticism, and perhaps recognition of the shifting tide.
You think you can just transform everything based on whims?
David deflected, the walls around him thickening again, misted under self-importance. I think creating a mural, a manifestation of our experiences, places humanity back in the equation.
It's not whimsy, it's purpose. Jake's heart surged with newfound clarity. He had embraced uncertainty and was ready to stand his ground for something greater than monetary gain. Seeing the glint of uncertainty in David's eyes, Jake continued, "This isn't just about me or Ben.
It's about inspiring others to dream again, to remember that there is so much more to life than corporate battles." A muted silence filled the diner, and Jake caught sight of Ben gazing up at him, pencil frozen in midair, recognition dawning on his little face as if he were witnessing his father transform right before his eyes. "You're putting all your chips in on this gamble, Jake. Be prepared if it doesn't turn out how you planned," David warned, the venom of his previous certainty weakening. "I am prepared," Jake replied, his voice resolute, a steady cadence igniting the air.
"Because I'm not afraid of failing anymore.
I'm afraid of never trying, of letting the fear of mediocrity overshadow the beauty of creativity."
David shifted slightly, as if feeling the pull of Jake's determination.
Jake felt the enormity of those words reverberate in the diner, and, in the murmur that followed, a collective affirmation began to rise among the patrons, words unspoken yet understood. "I hope you know what you're doing," David said, feigning indifference, but the weight behind his words was palpable. "I do," Jake affirmed, the strength of his belief carrying him forward beyond the confines of corporate loyalty. There would be triumphs and trials, but what mattered most now was the commitment to building a legacy of authenticity. As David turned, a frail grip on power slipping through his fingers, Jake reclaimed his space, the diner's vibrant environment radiating like an empowered banner of change, the tapestry of emotions sealed by promise. Inspired and invigorated, he looked at Ben, who broke into a radiant smile. Emily stepped out from the kitchen, her warm presence amplifying the lightness of the moment. The diner thrummed with renewed purpose, every joyful connection igniting a series of collaborations yet to unfold. Together, as father and son, they were now embarking on a journey of transformation, not just for themselves, but a commitment to sow the seeds of creativity in the hearts of many. As Jake glanced around at the room, he envisioned a mural that celebrated every joyful laugh, every story shared, a powerful affirmation of life beyond the confines of a boardroom. He embraced the exhilaration that came from that realization, understanding this was not just a triumph of one moment but the solid foundation of a future anchored in passion and connection. The choice was made. He had taken the leap into a realm where legacy would be defined through stories rather than spreadsheets. Jake now understood that legacy was not a one-time achievement, but a continuous journey marked by the dreams they dared to visualize together. Time was limited, the clock ticking toward brighter futures, and endless canvases awaited. It was time to craft those dreams into reality, and the heart of their story was utterly intact. This was the moment he would shine. This was the moment when everything converged, ready to be created anew. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment their reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion.